Hey everyone, welcome to Mountain Road Ride, and today we are going to be talking about chain lube, specifically Silca's new chain lube offerings, both the super secret chain lube, this one's been on the market for a while, and then their brand new Synergetic chain lube that has sort of come onto the shelves in the last couple of months. Now with today's review, I am not going to take a super scientific approach at all. I think there are enough resources out there. If you're interested in all those sort of lab testing and watt savings and microscopic analysis of chain wear rate and chain efficiency, all those sort of more scientifically calculated things, then this is not the review for you. What I'm going to do today, in fact, is I'm going to take a very average user approach. Something, quite frankly, that the average user, you and I, can test for ourselves. If you are interested in all those sort of more lab-based testing, then check out a website called Zero Friction Cycling. That's where you can scroll through graph after graph and pile through all the data if you want to get more detail on the scientific breakdowns of these lubes and how they perform in a lab test. I'm going to talk about how they perform out in the real world for an average user. So basically that comes down to three things for me. As an average user, I want to know how easy is it to apply this stuff. I want to know how clean does it keep my chain, and at the end of the day, I also want to just know how silent does it run. Those are three basic questions that I want to look at today, and so if you're interested in that kind of information about these two chain loops, then stick around. I've got a few pointers and my thoughts on how they performed over the last couple of months of testing for me. So let's talk about the two different lubes from Silca. Now, as a Silca product, you can definitely expect a premium price tag on these lubes. This 4-ounce container came in at $25, and similarly this 2-ounce container also set me back $25. So definitely at the premium end of the chain lube market. Now the two lubes differ also in terms of the different cyclists that they want to try and aim it for. The Super Secret Lube as a wax-based lube will definitely lean a little bit more to your performance-orientated cyclist. Somebody who's willing to spend the time to pre-prep the chain, we'll get to that, and looking for those efficiency gains. Somebody who's interested in the marginal gains that they can get from a chain lube. A little bit harder to apply at first, but does offer the potential for some efficiency gains, and lab tests have shown that this is really a strong contender on that front. Now on the other side, you've got the Synergetic lube, this being an oil-based lubricant. This one focused, I think in my opinion, a little bit more to your average cyclist who just wants to slap on a lube and be done with it. None of that pre-cleaning required. Maybe not super efficient like this one, but still offers, at least by Silca's claim, really good performance results, and we'll still see what those lab tests look like once they are available for this type of lube. Now, how did I use these two different lubes? As a performance-oriented lube, I put this one on my road bike. I'll look at that one a little bit later, and then behind me you can see my gravel bike, and that is where I tested the Synergetic chain lube. Now maybe I'm doing it the wrong way around and you're saying that I should put the clean lube on the dirty bike and vice versa, but this is what works for me. I do wash this bike quite a lot, and so for me an oil-based lubricant makes sense from that standpoint. So that is the kind of basic explanation of how these two chain lubes differ. Now, if you do want a lot more detail, and I go into extensive detail in my blog post, do check out the link in the description where you can find a lot more detail on the differences between these two lubes. But with that, let's now get into the real world application and talk about those three questions that I mentioned earlier. And that is, how easy is it to get this lube on the bike? How clean does it keep the chain? And then ultimately, how silently does this still perform when you've got this chain lube on your bike? So the first question is obviously, how easy is it to get this lube on the chain? Now I must give credit to Silca for both of these containers. I don't think you're going to find any other chain lube on the market that come with precision tips like you find on the Silca products. Now both the Super Secret chain lube as well as the Synergetic Really make it super easy to be precise in your application. It can't get any easier than these two lubes. It really is very nicely designed bottle that's going to make your life a whole lot easier, and you can already see where that $25 price tag comes in a well thought out and well designed bottle to apply the lube. Now, we got to ask the question, before you get the lube on the chain, there might be some pre-prep required, especially if you're starting off with a new chain or you are applying it to the chain for the first time. With the wax-based lube, your hardest work is going to come up front. You really need to do a deep clean of the chain before you apply this lube for the first time. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all that detail. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just link to the video that Silca put together on how to prepare your chain before you apply this lube for the first time. It's a little bit more cumbersome, a lot more work that goes into it up front to strip the chain of all factory grease or other lubes that you might have had on the chain in the past. That is a very key and instrumental step to the process, otherwise your wax will not adhere to the chain. So upfront work, kind of cumbersome. Now over on the other side of the spectrum, you've got your oil-based lubricant, and that really does not require the same amount of upfront work. Obviously you still want to maybe get out as much of that factory or packing grease as possible when you start off with a fresh chain, but it's also not the end of the world if you can't get all of it out, since this lube, it claims, will also displace that factory lube over time. So definitely two different approaches when it comes to that pre-prep required. A little bit harder lifting for the wax-based one, and then definitely much easier going with the oil-based lubricant. Next up, we are going to talk about how clean of a setup do you get with both these different chain lubes. Now, I'm going to start things off yet again with your super secret chain lube. Now, as a wax-based lubricant, you can definitely expect this to be a very clean setup. If you're after the cleanest possible setup that you can run, then a wax-based lubricant is practically a must. I can highly recommend this from a cleanliness standpoint. Also, on an ongoing basis, you're not going to have a lot of dirt being attracted to it. Wax does have a very good ability to repel the dust and dirt over the long run, so it makes overall clean look very easy and very possible. Now, I mentioned in the previous segment the requirement for a pre-clean, so that definitely is a little bit more work up front. So that deep cleaning that you need to do before you apply this for the first time is going to be your hardest work when it comes to a wax-based lubricant. But here's the good news. Beyond that first clean, things get a whole lot easier. And since the lube itself does not attract a lot of dirt over the long run, it makes that ongoing cleaning process super easy. Now, you can check out Silca's website. They do sell specific chain wipes that you can make use of to wipe down the chain. It contains an alcohol that will break down the wax a little bit better, and once you've cleaned it a couple of times, dried it off, put on some new fresh lube, and you're done with it. It really is super easy to maintain over the long run and keep a clean chain as you go along. And that is also the reason why I'm running this one specifically on my road bike. I use my road bike a little bit more for fair weather riding and indoor riding specifically. So I at least have one bike that's a lot easier to maintain, unlike this one that gets super dirty. That is where this chain lube will come in. Now, as an oil-based lubricant, you can just not expect the same type of cleanness that you get with a wax-based lubricant. This one is going to attract dirt, and also fairly quickly. I mean, 1 or 2 rides of this and you would already find a lot of that dirt and grime sticking onto your chain. I also mentioned in that previous segment that this one does not require as much of an upfront cleaning process, so initial clean, a lot simpler. Ongoing cleaning is a different story altogether. Since this one will attract a lot more dirt over the long run, you are going to find that you need to do a pretty deep dive. I went on a very messy ride a day or two ago and had to come back and give this bike a solid wash after that. Now granted, the conditions were such in nature that no chain lube would have stayed clean. It did just show that when you are going to subject your chain to extreme conditions, it's going to get super dirty, and it's going to require that you get really involved in cleaning it up. So that for me means running it through that chain cleaner with the degreaser, and then also making sure that I give the bike a solid wash after that. So definitely ongoing maintenance, a lot more when you use this particular chain lube. Alright, so let's get to the last question that might be on your mind, and that is, once you apply these different chain lubes, how silent of an operation can you expect from your chain? Now let's start things off with the Super Secret chain lube. Now this, as a wax-based lube, is going to sort of change over time. I think as you first apply it to the chain, you'll find it to be near silent. Very soft noise coming from the gearing, and especially as you run it through the different cassette sprockets and let that chain lube just settle into place, it's going to be super smooth and soft. But then you have to leave it to dry, and Silca recommends that you dry it for at least 24 hours. After which, when you start riding it, it will still be very silent. The first couple of rides with this chain lube is still going to be very quiet from a drivetrain noise level. But then as it continues to dry and wear off, the wax then falls off of your chain as you continue to ride, you are going to find that there is a slight metallic sound that sort of creeps into your shifting. Now, is this a very noticeable loud sound? Definitely not, but I think for somebody like me who is very tuned into the sound of the drivetrain, I do find that I can hear it, and it continues to increase over time as the chain continues to dry out and more of the wax falls off of the chain. So that's something to be aware of. I kind of use that noise level as a good indicator of when I'll have to top up on the wax, as the grinding sound, that slight metallic sound, then continues to creep into the shifting, especially so towards the more extreme range of the gears. I know that it's time to top up the wax levels yet again. Now, it's definitely, from a sound perspective, if I have to compare it to the Synergetic, a little bit louder. Alright, now if we talk about the oil-based lubricant of the Synergetic, then you can definitely expect that it will go on very silently, and because it is a wet lube, then it will also remain very silent throughout its use. Obviously, as you then attract dirt, there's going to be a bit more of a grinding getting into your system. But I will say also that this lube does have a unique property that as it continues its use, it's almost like the lubricant settles into the chain rollers even more so. And I've even found that even with dirt being attracted to the chain, it still performs very quietly and maybe even improves over more use. You can definitely expect a more silent operation with this lube versus the Super Secret chain lube. But I will also go as far as to say that this is definitely not the quietest lube I've ever experienced. Silca does go as far as to say that this could potentially be the world's quietest lube. In my opinion, I have seen other chain lubes in the past that have performed quieter than this particular chain lube. Now, that all goes back to the science of the different viscosities that you might find with different chain lubes on the market. And it might also be that those other chain lubes, even though they're thicker and stickier in nature, which gives them great noise reduction properties, they might also attract more dirt. So there's definitely that trade-off between the noise levels and then also the cleanliness that you can expect with your drivetrain. And I think from that standpoint, that is where Synergetic really strikes a good balance for me between maintaining a clean chain and then also a very silent operation. So there you have it. That's the two different chain loops. Goes on very quietly, dries out, and eventually creeps in a little bit more metallic sounds with your chain, with the Super Secret chain loop. Goes on very quietly and then remains quiet as that loop settles into the chain rollers over time. Alright, so there you have it. Those are my thoughts about the two different chain lubes that Silca has on offer, both in your drip wax super secret chain lube as well as the oil-based Synergetic chain lube. Now, what is my conclusion at the end of the day, and which is the best? Well, here's the simple answer. I just can't actually tell you which one is going to be the best for your particular riding conditions. That is something that's going to definitely differ from rider to rider. Do you want a little bit more of a performance-oriented, clean setup? Then the wax-based solution might be the better one. Or do you want the hassle-free maintenance experience that comes with Synergetic, where you can simply put it on and be done with it, and maybe even potentially get some higher miles from those applications? Sure, it's going to be a dirtier setup, but it has the ability then to also weather maybe a little dirtier, more extreme conditions as well. So those are kind of my thoughts. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to your particular riding conditions and what it is that you demand out of your bike and its drivetrain. Alright, I hope you liked this breakdown and that you found it helpful. If you did, please be sure to give it a like and do subscribe. We'll have plenty more gravel and bike related products in the future. So that's it from my side. I am Vian with Mountain Road Ride. Until next time, enjoy your ride.